Today, we're going to be talking about CLBC. There's a lot to dive into regarding that organization, which is an arm of the BC government, just so everybody knows, of the BC government. And we're also going to be talking about the fallout of the BC budget 2025. People left in legislative poverty under the BC government's discretion. So stay tuned. We'll be talking a lot and diving into so many other topics. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning into PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frayne. I'm the host. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and share the content that you're viewing today. If you're listening to the podcast version, there's lots of options to tune into your favorite podcast. There's a wide variety of options to choose from. I hope you enjoy today's content as usual. There's lots to dive into, and I have my lovely guest today, Tamara Taggart, joining me. We're going to be jumping into a lot of different topics. So, grab your beverage and your popcorn or chips or whatever you have, and tune in because today's going to be a great show. Hello, Tamara. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Brent?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Good.
I got my hair all tamed down today.
Looking good.
Yeah, it's all buckled down, and I'm all buckled in for the great show today. And we're gonna talk about this. First off, we'll talk about CLBC. So I'll hand it over to you, Tamara. What's going on in CLBC?
Oh, well, that's a big question. It's a good question too. I mean, I don't really know what's going on. It's a Crown Corporation, Community Living BC. It's they have a budget of about $1.7 billion. And they are responsible for adults in British Columbia with intellectual and developmental disabilities,
Mhm.
also including autism and FASD.
Mhm.
And to qualify for their services or their support, you need to meet their criteria, really their criteria being an IQ of 70 or less.
Mm.
So it's a large population. They say they serve about 29,000 people.
Mm.
We know, I've been involved in the, advocating for justice for Florence Girard.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Florence died in October of 2018. She was
Mm.
a woman with Down syndrome. She had been living in government care since she was about 8 years old. Um, and she was found dead in her caregiver's home. So she lived in a home share,
Oh, wow.
which was contracted through Kinsight, formerly known as Simon Fraser Society,
Mhm.
and they are funded by CLBC. And
Oh,
Florence died of starvation. She was
Yeah.
found,
oh,
she was 50 pounds.
terrible. That's just despicable, really. Uh,
Yeah.
I guess the question I have is for you, Tamara, is why didn't the care aides or the person who would be in charge of checking on people, why didn't they check on her?
Well, another good question. So, her home share provider was criminally charged.
Hmm.
So was Kinsight. Those charges against Kinsight were
But
stayed.
not what wasn't it not initially wasn't it initially that the care aide wasn't charged, or have I got that
No,
wrong?
no, she was charged. So it was a
Okay.
long investigation.
Hmm.
Okay.
I believe the investigation was about 15 months, maybe 17
Okay.
months, somewhere in there. It was a very long, long investigation by Coquitlam RCMP.
Hmm.
They had a lot of investigators on this,
Okay.
and did a very thorough job. So they recommended charges against Astrid Dahl, who was the home share provider, and the BC Prosecution Service recommended charges against Kinsight. So the Kinsight charges were later stayed by the BC Prosecution Service. Astrid was tried. She was so she was charged, she was tried, she was convicted of I don't quote you know what, I can't remember what exactly. She was charged with two things. She was found guilty of one. And
Mhm.
she basically received a conditional sentence where she had a curfew and had to do like some community service hours.
Mhm.
We fought for an appeal. We got an appeal. Crown won that appeal. And then she was charged with, or she was, uh, they then changed her sentence to jail time. But because of time served and,
Mhm.
she didn't see any the inside of a jail, for
Yeah.
lack of a better description. And
Oh.
then we advocated for a coroner's inquest. And the reason we did that is to find out what happened. So Astrid has been tried and convicted in a court of law.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So we have to move on from that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
then it's like, how did it happen? What are the true facts?
Mhm.
And how do we prevent it from ever happening again? So that coroner's inquest finally happened in January of this year for 2 weeks. It was the 13th of January until the 24th. And the jury came back with 13 recommendations. So in that time, and so I was an approved participant of the inquest. So was Florence's sister, Sharon. And so that means that I was there every day. I was approved to see the disclosure documents. There were over 5,000 pages. I read them all twice.
Mhm.
And I heard the testimony of, three people from CLBC, the RCMP investigator, someone from the assistant deputy minister for the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction,
Mm.
the home share provider, the home share, people from Kinsight, and Sharon testified. I testified as a someone who has a child with Down syndrome, because it really is to understand that too, and what comes with that diagnosis of having Down syndrome.
Mhm.
Um, and so you ask Brent, where was everybody?
Yeah.
Well, that is the big question. And we know from the investigation and from the testimony that there were visits from Kinsight, the Kinsight home share coordinator person, who it's their job to work with, the home share providers and check on the people that are living with them and all that. And you have to do it a certain amount of times and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So the last time somebody saw Florence from Kinsight
Mhm.
was in February of 2018. Saw with their own eyes.
Oh.
She died in October of 2018.
Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
my.
But we also know that someone from Kinsight was at the home 4 times in the last month of Florence's life, but they never looked in on Florence.
Oh, wow.
Oh wow. That's terrible.
And we also know that somebody from CLBC was in the home looking at the bedroom next door to Florence's in the month before she died, and never
Oh.
looked in on her either.
Couldn't be bothered to look in. No.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean their testimony, well, we weren't there for Florence. We were there for something else.
Well, the reason I mentioned the uh, if the carried was originally charged or not. Because I actually remember, I remember when the story first broke way
Mhm.
back in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and it seemed to me that some of the sentiment in the media was that it was sort of like, almost like a maid. It was treated
Oh, there was some of
it was
that.
it was treated like a maid, and people were saying, well, it was just like almost like
Yeah.
a yeah.
I think there was that came up, I think, Neil, uh in some testimony in the court case,
Mhm.
Okay.
where I can't recall if it was, I think it came from the defense, so Astrid's lawyer or Astrid, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back. It was so long ago now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that, Florence didn't want to eat. She didn't
Yeah.
want to live. she has the right to choose, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's not what
Mhm.
this was.
That was the whole narrative that I remember.
Yeah, and
Yep.
that's not
Yeah.
what it was. That narrative never flew in the
Mhm.
court of law. And it's just, it's just not, once again, I'll go back to, if you receive services or support
Mhm.
from CLBC, you have an intellectual or a developmental disability, and
Mhm.
you have an IQ of 70 or less. Now, can you decide whether you want to live? Do you understand what MAID is? Do you understand those? I mean, I put that out there to the universe. I mean, I think I know the answer. So,
Mhm.
that defense, if you will, or that idea is just not true, because we know from the coroner's inquest that Florence was in a bedroom, a tiny bedroom with a baby gate up at the door. She
Oh.
Mhm.
couldn't get out and couldn't get in. She had osteoarthritis,
Mm.
severe osteoarthritis in her hip. She
Mhm.
was sleeping on a mattress on the floor. She had a little window in her bedroom, and there was a dresser pushed up against the window because apparently she liked to tap on the window and yell hello to people that were walking by.
Mm.
And she was up a big flight of stairs and had serious mobility issues because of her osteoarthritis.
Mhm.
So to suggest that she didn't want to eat or she didn't want to live is quite a horrific idea, because she couldn't leave her room.
Well,
Her
also
meals were brought to her.
yeah, also the idea that she starved to death is horrific too.
Mhm.
I
The last 2 years of her life were horrendous.
Mhm.
You don't starve to death overnight. You don't starve to death in a week.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I will say that the forensic pathologist who did the autopsy, his testimony was really awful to listen to. And because you're listening to a scientist talk about, a person, but really it's, you know what I mean? Like, he's
Yeah.
talking scientifically
Yeah,
and
yeah,
describing, sitting beside Sharon, and it was just terrible for her, right? To
yeah.
hear, this doctor describe what her sister was like at 50 pounds, 50
Mm.
pounds. And at one point,
Yeah.
Florence, was told by doctors she needed to lose weight because she was way too heavy. She was overweight because she couldn't stop eating when she was in a group home. And she
Mm.
would sneak out of her room in the middle of the night and go eat an entire tub of margarine.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is, nobody was watching her, right? So it was suggested it would help her hip if she lost some weight. So she went from being very, very overweight
Mhm.
to starving to death.
Mhm.
And so I'll just say this. The forensic pathologist said that in his career so far, he has done about 3,500 autopsies.
Mm.
And this is the first time he has ever written starvation as a cause of death.
Wow.
Oh,
Because
that's
starvation doesn't happen in Canada. You
Mhm.
don't
exactly.
die of starvation in Canada,
It's not
Mhm.
you know?
supposed to.
No.
Yeah.
And so it just doesn't happen. And so that gives you, a little bit of an idea of just how um I mean, it's unimaginable.
Well, one of the things I
Mhm.
wanted to go back to is that you were last on the podcast in September of last year. Um, And what I'll do actually at the end of this episode, actually, it'll be in about 24 hours, it'll happen. But I can post your first episode at the end at the end, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
video, I'll post a link to your first episode.
Mm.
And you talked about your son
Mhm.
and you talked about him doing laundry and stacking the juice boxes,
Mm.
Right.
and that really stuck with me big time. And I wanted to tie that in with Pink Shirt Day.
Oh yeah.
Um, I always kind of thought that the Pink Shirt Day, I mean, it's a great idea, but it always, as a person with a disability, it always strikes me as very disingenuous. And
Mm.
Bowling.
I don't know if I don't know if you want to speak on, I don't know if it's just about me, if it's just my opinion of it, or
Oh,
if
I
you
don't
have,
think it's just your
or
opinion.
or if you have the kind of the same feelings towards it, that it's kind of disingenuous because uh it seems that everybody talks about Pink Shirt Day and not no bowling and stuff, but the government policies are like, it's
Yeah.
like almost like if you have a disability, it's fair game. It's
Well,
Yeah.
I have one comment on that one. My favorite line is bowling disabled stops now.
Hmm.
yeah, and again, I don't know if that's it's just my opinion of everything, and I'm not saying it's not a great thing.
Absolutely. I
I
think what
want,
you're trying to say, Neil,
yeah, yeah,
if I'm reading you right here,
hmm
is that Pink Shirt Day is important, right?
it
And
totally is, yeah,
it's for
yeah,
kids
hmm
to remember that, we accept everybody because this is where we learn to be accepting and understanding and recognize that we're all different.
Mhm.
But when we see adults, especially elected politicians, wearing pink shirts
Mhm.
and saying I stand with no bullying and all that, when I mean we read their tweets, we hear their rhetoric, we know that they're not supporting people with disabilities in this province, we
hmm
know that disabled students are not receiving an equitable education.
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, it it's not genuine. And
yeah,
so I mean, and I agree with you on that, it's not genuine. Like if you're gonna wear a pink shirt, then you better walk the walk. And you can do that by it's not hard
Mhm.
to be kind, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's not
It shouldn't be. It
hard,
shouldn't be.
no, right?
Yeah.
And
Post
it's
kind.
not hard to do the right thing. And so I don't know, last night I was speaking at this AGM for about inclusion in schools. And I got really worked up, as I usually do. And because why are we still talking about this? Like
Yeah.
why are we still fighting for the same basic human rights
Yeah. Yeah.
for disabled students? Why is my son in a segregated classroom in Vancouver?
Yeah.
Why is my son, uh, being tested for his IQ so that he can get CLBC, funding when he turns 19. He's 17, and we just completed all this paperwork and this psych ed test that he had to do to see what his IQ is.
Mhm.
And my whole point is that, with CLBC and with education, and they're just, they don't teach our kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities in school. They segregate them,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and then they test them to see what their IQ is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they're comparing my 17-year-old son with Down syndrome against a typical 17-year-old. So,
Mhm.
like, what
Mhm.
do you think his IQ is going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you place all this, importance, if you will, on an IQ so that he can receive funding.
Yeah.
And and I just think that, like, first of all, if you have a diagnosis of Down syndrome, you receive that at birth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we know that a lot of people receive it in utero. And
Mhm.
so, um, why are we testing anybody with Down syndrome? Like,
Yeah.
why? Like,
Mhm.
we know everything there is to know about Down syndrome. The three of us can go to the bookstore right now and take out a bunch of books on Down syndrome and learn everything we need to know. So
Exactly.
why are we wasting our time doing that?
Well, even
We know, right?
when you talk about segregation too, is like it's like I was probably one of the first physically handicapped kids from GF Strong to transfer because back in the day, like we're almost
Mm,
going back 50 years. Back in the day, GF Strong did have a school there.
that's right.
It was
Mhm.
primarily a a place for physio. It was primary exercise was that, but it also had the school, and I was there till grade two,
Right.
and then um or it wasn't they didn't really have grades then actually,
Right. Of course.
honestly,
Mhm.
but it was maybe equivalent to grade two. And then I always told my parents I really want to switch over to a normal school because this feels weird that everybody's
Yeah.
talking about their disability and crutches and wheelchairs, and when you go to, like, you're always going to see physios, and it just seemed very weird because then I would go home and like be playing games in the yard with the neighborhood kids, and so
Yeah.
it was a really disconnect there, like a real
Yeah, you wanted to
weird.
be with people your own
Yeah.
age and learn with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I said to my parents, I really want to go to a normal school. So I transferred from GF Strong into a quote unquote normal school. I went back to grade two. So I was maybe a year behind because they just wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay. And so again, that was almost 50 years ago.
Mhm.
And and so fast forward 50 years 50 years
I
ahead,
know.
and we're still here. We're still talking about segregation
It's
'Cause-
unbelievable.
50 years
Yeah.
later. It was just nuts.
Yeah,
It's just
because I
nuts.
when I was in school, the same thing. Like they would put me into another room to learn to do touch typing, and
Right.
they would put a book over top of my hands so I couldn't see the letters, which is great. I mean, I understand that you don't want to cheat. I mean, learn where the letters are on the keyboard, right? And I wanted to be in the regular class. I mean, the class was right beside me, but no, we don't want the children to feel uncomfortable. Well, what?
Right. Because you make them feel uncomfortable,
Yeah,
or I mean, come
yeah,
on.
yeah, and so the other children in the class, I could hear from it says, "Well, we want Brent to be in the class with us."
Yes.
Well, he's learning to touch type, and he can't write fast enough, so it would really disrupt the class. It's better in his best interest. And I came in, and I don't know, something came over me where I said, "Is it my best interest or your best interest for me to be
Exactly.
in the other room?"
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was scolded. I was scolded by the teacher's assistant saying, "Brent, why would you say that?" And I go, "Because I want to feel belonged, and
Yeah.
I want to feel belonged with
Yeah.
the rest of my classmates." Well,
Yeah.
it
And
has to be this
maybe
way.
your classmates would like to learn how to use the touch
Yeah,
chat. Maybe that would be a good thing for them to learn too.
yeah,
Yeah.
So, you know what I
exactly.
Yeah.
mean? Like, we
Yeah.
forget this about kids, right? As
Yeah.
kids, we don't understand
Hmm.
difference. We don't see difference. We are so um accepting.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
we change because of what we learn, and we learn from observing
Hmm.
things around us. So every time those kids see you removed from the classroom, Brent, they go,
Yeah,
"Oh, Brent's different.
Brent's different.
Okay,
Yeah.
he's
yeah,
different. He's
Yeah.
not like us.
yeah,
Hmm.
Hmm.
I
exactly.
don't know why he's not like us, but he's not like us." And they continue to see it year after year. And then all of a sudden you get into high school
Yeah,
and Beckett's in a completely different class. He arrives at a different time. He leaves at a different time, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, and so guess what? None of the high school kids know him or know
Hmm.
his name,
Wow.
or he has no friend dates ever anymore. He sure
Hmm.
did in school, right?
That's
And
crazy.
so tell
Yeah.
me what you think of this, because this is what I keep trying or hoping that people in positions of power understand, is by having, we teach kids at a very young age
Hmm.
to discriminate against people with disabilities
Yeah.
because of what we show them.
Hmm.
And so
Exactly.
when we
Yeah.
pull you out of class, when we say, oh, Neil, you're going to go to this class at this school, but it's not really a school. And then maybe we'll let you come to a normal school, but we're going to put you back a year because we're not sure if you're ready. No, that's your job as adults to make sure that Neil is ready and to make sure Neil is accepted and to make sure that Neil is educated. And then, you know, what does it teach all the kids in that school that Beckett goes to, my son, when he's in a segregated classroom?
Yeah.
That he's different.
Yeah.
Actually, all those kids are different. And they're so different, they don't even arrive at the same time as the rest of the kids. They leave at a different time. They go out the back door.
Yeah.
They don't even go in the front door.
It's crazy.
I mean, and their schedule is determined by what the stupid bus does. Is the bus, oh, sorry, the bus drivers aren't working today, the school bus for disabled kids. Whether you take the bus or not, your class is determined by what the bus schedule is. It is so discriminatory. I can't even begin, and it's different everywhere in the province. So what happens in Vancouver, where we are, is different than what happens in North Vancouver.
Yeah.
And it's different than what happens in West Van, and it's different than what happens in Trail or Fort St. John or Kelowna or Victoria or Courtenay. It's all different because it's different school districts. It's enraging.
It's all work.
You guys are getting me mad now. Now you're getting me mad.
Well, the thing I was going to say too, though, is you just talked about discrimination, and I always make the point on the podcast. It's like, we're not allowed to call it discrimination. It's like, don't say that, Neil. It's not discrimination.
I do it all the time.
Everybody,
it is discrimination.
Well, it is, but you have governments, and you have even our human rights tribunals, and
it's discrimination.
They're all saying, well, that's not discrimination, Neil. Like,
well, how do they know?
Yeah,
are they discriminated against because of a disability?
Exactly.
No, there was one thing that
it infuriates me that they do that all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was one thing that I did manage to change the concept of how a teacher was to kind of view large print for classmates. So I remember back in high school, of course, they would put you into your own little home room, but I had my own home room, not just our regular home room, but I had my own home room to go to for people with disabilities, for visual impairment, blind or visual impaired. So I still felt that same thing when I was a child. I thought I feel isolated. Why? And so I started learning to speak up. And my assistant that was with me said, Brent, you just have to speak up and let the teacher know that, no, you want to be in the class. I said, well, yeah, but you're allowing me to be in this room. I said, can you not go there? They're like, yeah, but we're trying to teach you to be you, for you to speak up for yourself. Not, I mean, sure, we could go there, but we want you to do it. So I had got the courage, Tamara, and I walked into the classroom and I interrupted the class. The teacher looked at me, Brent, I'm actually teaching. Is there something important? I go, yeah, I have something to say to all my classmates. I would like to see all of you read on that overhead projector, have larger print. So the ones in the back of the class can actually see it better. They're like, Brent, that's going to cause a lot more work for us to do. And I said, but I want to feel that I'm belonging with the rest of the class and have them be what I see. Yeah. And so I managed to change that.
Wow.
And the teacher asked, is everybody wanting this? Yeah, that would be great. So people sitting in the back
probably helped them too.
Yeah.
You probably helped everybody.
It did. And there was a young girl who I actually managed to meet many years later, who was actually had just got into teaching. And I'm like, oh, wow. And so she got into teaching. I was actually in college and I bumped into her and she says, I'm actually a teacher's assistant now, Brent. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for what you did many years ago. And I had to recall, what did I do? And so she says, you interrupted the accounting class and it was all about small numbers. So they blew it on the overhead projector and you did the right thing. And I said, well, it took a lot of courage. And I ran for student council at the time. And of course, no, they voted me down. Oh, because he was the different kid. They didn't want that, right? But I ran and I said, vote for Frayne. Don't miss the train. Vote for Frayne. And I almost got it in, but I think they managed to get me out. I would have won. But yeah, I ran again, and I actually did get in the next year for it. But yeah, it was great, and I managed to change part of the system that way
That's
because I
good.
felt there's discrimination, and I
Well,
talked about
it does take a lot of courage, right?
yeah.
And I think people forget that. And here's the other thing that,
Hmm.
I think is so important to remember is not all students with disabilities have um the skills
Mhm.
or the the they're not able to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, one of the things that I have found really interesting in this sort of advocacy that I've been trying to do around, the safety and
Hmm.
care of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because that is, my son, like, what's going to happen to my son when I die?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where will I can't assume that my daughters will look after him. Like,
Mhm.
that's not their the responsibility. I mean, they love him, of course, but they also, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
we have to
Mhm.
think about these things. And there are a lot of people that don't have any family, as you know, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes.
There are a lot of kids in the life skills class that are, live in foster homes. They are, I mean, we don't know everybody's story. And
Exactly.
so that's why, you know, equal rights are so important. And
Mhm.
so how do we, I've been hearing this narrative, I heard the Minister Malcolmson on the news. And she has been saying, well, everybody I talk to is happy with
Yeah.
CLBC.
Mhm. Mhm.
She said, all the self advocates I speak to are happy. They don't want anything
Oh.
to go to with CL. They don't want anything to change with CLBC.
Mhm.
They don't want it to go away. They don't want to go back to institutions.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Now, where does this idea of institutions come from? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
the minister has mentioned it twice in news stories, and CLBC actually said, one of their VPs, Joanne Mills, she was the first one to say it on the news. She
Hmm.
said that, we do not have the system to support, this model of care. And if it were to move back into government, CLBC,
Mhm.
it would mean reinstitutionalization.
Hmm.
To me, that is fear mongering. To
It
me, that
is.
is
Yeah.
Yeah.
going to
Absolutely.
the lowest, scariest place for everybody.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like, is the Minister of Education going to say, "Oh, well, we're going to bring back residential schools"? No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're not going to bring back institutions. Like,
Mhm.
it just seems like such a place of fear, because of
Mhm.
course it strikes fear, right?
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely, it does.
Mhm.
And the other part where you mentioned about self-advocating, one thing that I'm hearing just in my community and see, on social media, there's a lot of people who want their voices to be heard, but they're scared about coming forward too,
Mhm.
Of
because
course.
they're worried that the system, it's a systemic issue, that they're worried that they'll be punished, that if they speak out, that the government's going to say, oh, but now they're going to hold back their income because they're
Mhm.
standing up for themselves and saying how they feel. And I always say, you need to just say how you feel. And I was taught that since I was a child, going through high school, going through college, my instructors would always, we would do role playing. And we did a lot of role playing. And I was scary because there was a friend of mine who was, I knew at the time in class, and he would be the big bully. And you can imagine Tamara standing up against him, and he's like, and he would be harsh with his words. And I was being graded. I was being graded by my instructor. We all were, and it was all in a good grade, just to.
Yeah.
And we were all there just to kind of see where everybody's at on their learning process and what could we do better, or what could the instructor do better to basically change the narrative around and make us be more self confident in ourselves, and don't be scared about if you fall down, you pick yourself up and you keep going, right? You learn from others.
Those are great skills to
Yeah.
have.
And I was taught that, and it really built my self-confidence up. We were put into a room, and they had this window, and everybody on the other side were watching, and it was like I had a camera
Yeah.
sitting. I felt like I was like a news anchor to me, and it was right there, like it was all like officially done, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sitting here and I'm doing a self-biography of myself, and not knowing that I was going to be graded. They didn't tell everybody in the class, oh yeah, you're going to be graded on this later. I got an A+ on mine.
Wow.
At first I was like inside, like I was just like petrified, going like, and I thought I was gonna be stuttering. And no, they said it was only good. They said the only thing that I messed up on, they still got an A+ is that to believe in yourself, believe in yourself 100%. They said you were about 98, almost 99%, but there was a couple things that I had to brush up on, and over time I've learned to be more of a self-advocate, but also learning to learn from others. I guess, and that's the thing that I'm learning from, is learning from others. Is that okay? Rather than double speak, like learn from more lived experience, and hearing stories from people is great. But what I'm hearing too is a lot of negative stuff from government, always excuses of why not to do something. And it infuriates me. And that would be another topic that we'll get into on today's.
Yeah. Do you ever get the? Oh,
sorry,
sorry. Go ahead, Brent. No, you go ahead. Sorry, you finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, we'll talk about the BC budget 2025.
Oh, geez, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and let me ask you guys this.
Sure.
Do you ever get the? So I'm a parent, right?
Yeah.
I'm coming at this from, from my experience is that of a parent. My son's experience is different, and you were both self-advocates. Do you
Well,
ever?
I had really strong parents, which helped too.
Yes, of
growing up.
course, right? It does help, but sometimes I hear this narrative that, and it's coming from, we don't need to say where it's coming from, but you'll get the idea that, oh, parents are, trying to make money off their disabled kids. That's why they want the money.
Right.
Or parents are trying to, or this idea that, I remember talking to a former minister. This was years ago. And we were talking about supporting people with disabilities and funding and all that sort of stuff. And I said, I just think every single person in the province who, like, there's so many easy things to do. Like, I think everybody with a disability in the province, no matter who you are, should have free transit. Like, I just think that should just be a thing, right?
Absolutely.
And they said, oh, no, we could never do that. And I said, well, like, why? And they said, well, because there are some people that, like, what is disability? And I said, well,
oh my gosh.
What do you mean by that? And they said, well, some people, they hurt their back at work and then they go on PWD and then they don't ever want to go back to work again. And it was this narrative that people are trying to get rich off of PWD. And it's like, no one's getting rich off PWD.
Exactly.
No one.
And I just and to jump off your point, and it's going to seem like it's going on a little bit of a different direction, but not really. Is before this podcast today, we had another episode, and we talked about definitions of like what does it mean to be disabled, and all kind of the word cloud around disability and disabled, and there's a lot of negative words like wrecked and decrepit and fault. Like if you look at the word cloud of disabled or disability, every word is negative, right? And so we kind of focused on that as an episode of like, if you have all this word cloud of negativity, of course you're going to have systemic discrimination from that. I mean, if you're starting with a baseline of all these negative words, it just is a natural progression to launch into some sort of systemic discrimination to kind of offshoot from that, right? And so anyway, we devoted a podcast to that, and near the end of that,
It was
Yeah, and near the end of the podcast, I talked about uh, my only really serious experience with discrimination. Like I've been pretty lucky, I would say. Again, I'm going to be 57 soon. At,
Me
at
too, Neil.
at the end of this month, I'll be 57. And so in almost 57 years, I've been pretty clean of discrimination, and but I did share, when I went to college university with the intent that I was going to become a school teacher,
Mhm.
an elementary school teacher, and I got all the way through. It was UBC, and I got all the way through the first year. I was fine. I did the first practicum, fine, no problems. I went all the way through almost the whole second year, and I got the second practicum, and I got a really bad placement with I just have to say, a really bad teacher, and
Yeah.
a faculty advisor. You have the classroom teacher and the faculty advisor. It was a grade 5 class, and the faculty advisor from UBC and the school teacher that was supposed to be my mentor, they had it in their minds already that I was going to fail. Like, it was going to be this
Wow.
self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I kind of knew it. Like, as soon as I walked in, I
Yeah.
kind of knew, like, these guys have it in for me. Like, I just knew it.
Yeah, they're
And
for you.
and
Yeah.
yeah, like, I'll give you a couple of examples that I shared again on the previous podcast, but there was a couple things like, for example, the teacher said, well, actually, and even the faculty advisor from UBC said the same thing. They were both in cahoots with one another. They said, you know what, Neil, you really have to work on better posture. They said,
Posture.
yeah,
Oh,
they said,
yeah.
because I used to have crutches, right? I used to have crutches, and with my cerebral palsy, I have bent legs, and they both said your bent legs are making the kids uncomfortable. They actually they actually
Oh
Oh my
my
God.
yeah,
gosh.
yeah, they actually said that to my face. They said
Your
your
disability is scaring the children.
yeah,
That's what they were saying.
that's what they
Oh
said.
my gosh.
Yeah, they said your bent legs are making the kids uncomfortable,
Oh,
and
Disgusting.
oh,
yeah, and
sure.
I said, and I, of course, as a student teacher, I didn't have a lot of power, right?
Of course, of
Because I knew
course.
I knew if I spoke up too much, I'd be shown the door.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I mean, I tried to go to the dean about it, and they didn't help me, the dean of education.
You're
But
probably thinking a lot that you wanted to say, though.
yeah, I mean, I basically wanted to say
Oh,
that I think you're the one that's uncomfortable. I don't think the kids are uncomfortable. I think you're uncomfortable with my bent legs, right? But they would say that, and then they would say things
wow.
like, you
Oh
know,
my
like
gosh.
I also have messy writing, like because of my disability, like my cerebral
Yeah.
Yeah.
palsy, I have
Yeah.
messy writing, and so I knew already that because of that, I would just wanted to call up a student that had better writing to write on the blackboard for me.
Hmm.
And they both said, "You can't do that, Neil. You can't do that.
Oh my God.
If you can't write on the blackboard, you shouldn't be a teacher." And
Oh, so
like,
that is the
Oh, the discrimination.
prerequisite? Like
yeah,
that's it?
yeah,
My
so that it was like every day
oh,
they were
Neil.
tell I
Oh,
know they were
oh,
telling me every day everything that I couldn't do
Yes.
was a
Yes.
strike against me, right?
That's so
And
awful.
like I said, it was my first real exposure to honest to goodness discrimination,
Yes.
mhm.
and it just kind of sucks, because
It's horrible. It's
yeah,
unacceptable. It happens all the time, and anyone who says it doesn't happen
Yeah.
yeah,
is wrong.
Because
yeah,
They're
it happened
wrong.
to me where I was taking a course in college, and of course you need those transferable credits in order to build them up to go in to get to another course that you qualify for based on your prerequisites. How strong
Yep.
were you in English, math from high school, and basically they'll use credits from college. And there was one course I wanted to get into, and it was about business economics. I had to fight and fight and fight. They wanted me to do some prerequisite tests at the college because to prove myself, to see if maybe that's maybe my stronger suit, they said, or not. Oh, I'm sorry. You're not fast enough to comprehend, Brent, to get this. I said, they hand-eye coordination. They want me to write faster. I
Oh
said,
my
well, I can write
goodness.
faster, but it's going to be all scribbles. And I said, and so yeah, you wouldn't be fast enough. And so I fought it. I actually won it. But I did just to throw it back in their face. I turned around and they gave me a student loan. I turned around and I said, you know what? I don't want this. I threw it right back in their face. I don't want this. I took a different course and I excelled in it. But then it's kind of like what Neil had gone through. I thought, well, this is great, right? This is going good. And they set me up for a fall because they thought, okay, he's going to be funny with us. Okay, we're gonna this. Oh yeah, we'll get you to this. So I took the business administration program,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going great. We'll exempt you from this because you were so fast at typing, but they knew that I wasn't fast at. I had to, it's kind of like building up a story. You have your kind of your entry into it, and then you've got your main theme of it, and then your kind of your ending part. Well, I was having trouble to the main theme part. I got the beginning part and then the ending, but I was having trouble of problem solving the main part. And they said, you're not fast enough, Brent. You're not fast enough. And so unfortunately, yeah, like the kids, the adults here, sorry, not kids, the adults here, they're gonna start kind of wondering, well, like maybe you're not fast enough, maybe you don't fit in with them as your peers. I went through this shit. I spoke up and said I went through this shit when I was in elementary school. I'm supposed to be in college. I mean, aren't we supposed to be treating everybody equally? Yeah.
No, because we teach kids,
yeah,
like I said earlier, right?
Yeah.
From a young age,
and
that someone's different.
Yeah.
That means they're not the same as you. That means that they go somewhere else. They don't belong.
I literally walked out of the class. I actually got up and I walked out. And I said, yeah, I stepped back from it. Sadly, I had a student loan. I had to pay it back, but they didn't give me back the whole amount. Well, you were already too far into the program. They made an exception.
Right. But don't you think it's interesting how we're taught to judge somebody?
Yeah.
Immediately, right? We judge you by how you look. So I see, Neil, that, you're using crutches. So therefore you're judged that you're not very smart. You can't be a teacher. Your handwriting's messy. The kids are scared of you. Next.
Well,
I mean,
also,
it's terrible.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it goes back to the language a little bit, or how things are defined, because even cerebral palsy, if you translate cerebral palsy, it means brain numb. Brain numb, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
But what I was going to say for like to end my story or give it a mic drop moment a little bit is like my first wife, she actually had a disability as well. She was in a motorized wheelchair her whole life, more or less. She had arthrogryposis, which means your joints are fused. So she needed 27 carriages basically her whole life. And but she was extremely able, considering the profoundness of her disability, right? And that's why I just fell in love with her and we married. And but what I was going to say is she also was a teacher. She became a teacher, and because she was younger, she was about 7 years younger than I was. And so when we hooked up, she told me her story. We compared notes. We hooked up when I was like 32 or 33, and we compared notes on our teaching experience, my failed one and her successful one. And so it turned out that she went into teaching about maybe 4 or 5 years after I did.
Oh, okay.
And she went to SFU. And again, so this is somebody in a wheelchair, like no posture to speak of, right? And she also couldn't write on the blackboard. But see, for her, it wasn't a big deal. The teachers that helped her get her teaching, it was like not a big deal. If you can teach, you can teach, right?
Wow.
So she got through. She got through. Like again, it was about 4 years after me. Like my attempt, she got through. Like I said, no posture to speak of, and not able to write on the blackboard, and she got through fine. Because she had the support of two teachers that didn't have that kind of stigma of saying, you can't do it, Neil, because you have a disability, right?
Yeah, stigma, discrimination. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like when I continued, I was so proud of myself when I when I had got through that course after having to fight and fight and fight, and I had to, prove myself, which I shouldn't have had to do. But when I went to traffic, customs, and transportation, um, everybody accepted me for who I was. I had an awesome instructor because just accepted me for my disability. They knew that, okay, he's going to be having, maybe a little bit more of not a barrier. I don't like the word barriers too much, but I'll use the word barrier in it, where they said, we'll work with you, Brent. We'll work with that situation where your hand and eye coordination are not fast enough. So they knew that I was excelling in typing. And they said, so that's a prerequisite for you. Use that to your advantage. And so I was way ahead of the class, but I had to do a lot of travel time between VCC in Vancouver, all the way back and forth commuting. But Neil knows about this, is thanks for VRS, because they paid for my transportation. So I would take a main chartered bus. When they had the charter buses, not just transit, it was a lot faster. So I would sit on there and I would be reading while I'm on the bus, and I'd have a like a night light on there, and it would be neat where I could actually read it and blow up the print and kind of read it while I was going, and it would save me a lot of time. But I learned a lot about the especially what we're going through now with the trade stuff. So I learned a lot back then, and the intermodal stuff and transferable skills, right? And it helped me excel in a lot of areas about self-advocating and teaching people about, even in my community, of buy this, maybe not buy that, because it's gonna be better. But yeah, I mean, I guess getting into the topic of, we're going to branch into the BC budget, because looking at priorities versus non-priorities. I mean, taking care of your citizens in your own province, from the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. It was a bombshell disappointment, a huge gut punch in the BC budget 2025. 2 years in a row, no increase. Meanwhile, cost of living skyrocketing. This year, now we got even more of a problem. We got cost of living skyrocketing, high rents, and now we got a tariff, on and on, off, on, off. And they're just using that as an excuse of the reason why they can't do something in the BC budget. I always say, be proactive. You should have dealt with it back in 2023 when they gave $125 to some PWD, but some did not get that. It was a missed opportunity. I wanted to get your take on the BC budget 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to it. I listened to the Minister of Finance, Minister Bailey, present it, and then when I saw the document, I immediately scanned down to the important parts for me, which what are they doing to support disabled British Columbians? And like you said, I think that CLBC is getting an additional $300 million, so that'll put them to $2 billion, I believe, per year. Once again, I'd like to know where that money's going, because it's not reaching the people who they support. But that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
I think that, you said, oh, they could have been proactive. Tell me when you've ever known a government to be proactive. It doesn't happen, right?
Exactly.
I think that, I really hate to say this, but I think that when we say these things, and I do say it when I meet with ministers and support staff, because it's important and it's the truth. My son, the elephant in the room is my son is not supposed to be here, right?
Yeah.
The elephant in the room is when, the majority of people who find out they are carrying a baby with Down syndrome, I think it's like 90 something percent of people. I think it's 90% maybe. I don't know. Maybe the numbers have changed. I have no idea. Let's say it's 90%. I know it's 90 something, so we'll go with 90. 90% of people that find out they are carrying a baby with Down syndrome terminate the pregnancy. Now, I believe in a woman's right to choose to do whatever she wants to do with her body, and I'm not judging that part of it. But what I am judging is the fear we have around
Mm,
disability. What I am judging is the ableism that is entrenched in government and the discrimination towards people with disability that is entrenched in our society and
mhm,
government, that you don't matter if you have a disability because you probably don't vote, you don't work, you just want to like, get free money.
mhm.
And I don't know. I honestly don't know what they think that someone's going to do with $1,400 a month in this province, right? I
Yeah.
don't I
Yeah.
don't know. And God forbid you should get married and they claw back, or
Mhm.
God forbid you should get a job and try to get out of poverty,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
they'll claw that all back too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it,
you know,
it comes down to, I'm telling you, it comes down to
mhm.
discrimination. It comes
Yeah.
down to, uh, uh, somebody like my son, and I keep coming back to my son because this is the experience that I know.
Mhm,
And because of Down syndrome BC, I talk to hundreds of families who have a child, or a sibling, or a grandchild, or a niece, or a nephew, or a friend with Down syndrome, and the experience is universal. It's a visible disability. When you have
mhm.
a visible disability, you are judged the second you walk through the door.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And there's always a conversation, then we have people who have an invisible disability,
I was just
and
gonna say,
it's
yeah.
just terrible for them too,
Mhm.
because there's these expectations of who they are should be, and
Mhm.
then when somebody finds out they aren't, then they're you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's crap right across the board.
Well, yeah.
And
And
you
it's like
don't
when
it
somebody has
goes
a
back, Brent, to they think that you want to get rich.
oh
They think
yeah.
you just want to
Yeah.
sit on your couch
Yeah.
and collect your $1,400 a month,
Mhm.
and never have a care in the world. Well, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many people with disabilities that have invisible disabilities, as you mentioned,
Yep.
and then of course the governments. Well, that person's able-bodied. They used to be
Exactly.
able to do that kind of work,
Mhm.
and it's that key word, work, work, work.
Work, work,
We
work,
have we
work.
have the jobs plan.
You don't want to educate my son, but you
Yeah,
want him to get a job.
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, explain this to me. Stacking orange juice boxes?
Stacking
Because that's the
Yeah,
only thing
yeah.
you taught him at school. I mean,
And
I'm being a bit extreme here,
and
but
he can and
really
he can
that's
do
what it is.
and he
yeah.
can do laundry. And he can
He
do
can do
laundry.
laundry too, right? Like, I
Yeah.
haven't taught him anything. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's really, I just feel that the louder we are about this, those of us who can be, because you know what, as you mentioned, Brent,
Yeah.
um, there are a lot of people who are fearful,
Mhm,
and I respect that, and I understand that,
mhm,
and I can tell you from the dozens of people that I have spoken to, about who are a home share provider, or if they complain to CLBC, like, I need this for my person,
mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I need this for my person. They need a walker. They need, we need more than $11 a day for food. We need, and
Mm,
they keep advocating for this. Eventually, if they're too loud,
yeah.
or if they go on social media and complain,
Mhm,
they get a phone call or a knock on the door, and it's like, it sounds like it's really maybe too much trouble for you. So we'll just we'll take your person and we'll place them with someone else. And that's
Mhm.
the
mhm,
threat they get. Well, they love this person.
mhm.
They're not a home share provider because they want to get rich. No one is
Yeah.
getting rich being a home share provider. They
No.
do it because they care about people,
Yeah.
and now this person is family to them. Like,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
become a brother or a sister or a son or a daughter. Like, they love them. So
Absolutely.
the worst thing that can happen is that threat of, well, we'll just remove them. It sounds like it's too much trouble for you.
Mhm.
Like we're not human beings, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, it's just part of their systemic discrimination process. But it's embedded in their policies.
Yeah.
And whoever's written these
Yeah.
policies way back in, I mean, probably over hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They need to modernize. They need to completely, like, I mean, when I say modernize, completely
Yeah.
dismantle and
I agree.
and redo just the standards. I mean, the standard of living. And people should not be living in abject poverty.
No,
I always say
exactly.
it's they're medically assessed and designated as a person with disability by their practitioner. I mean, they a practitioner. I mean, my family doctor. I remember the day one, and he says, "Brent, I cannot." Um, Make you qualify for different supplements that your worker has given you a sheet to give to me.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
looking at this. He says, "You don't have Crohn's disease, Brent. You don't have this. You don't have this. I can only say who you are. And I've known you since you were a little toddler. So I know
Yeah.
what you can and cannot do, but you probably know better than I can.
Yeah.
But from a medical practitioner, you are who you are. You can't change who you are, even though the government may want you to change who you are to their
Yes.
advantage. But I can only assess you for who you are. And I mean, you have these disabilities and they don't go away. The government wants to go away.
No.
And so he was awesome. But he says, I refuse to fill the form out for all these other extra things that they want you to have.
Right.
So they don't have to raise the rates higher. And I
Yeah.
said, I also refuse to fill out a DTC form for you because you're disabled in BC. You're a citizen of Canada. So I'm not filling it out. I'm like, Doc, I said, apparently my bank says I could get an RDSP. Brent, I know what that is, but you need to have this DTC first in order to get that. But I'm not doing that because you're disabled in BC. You're a citizen of Canada. End of story. Sorry, bud. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
know. And also the hoops that we all have to jump through, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's ridiculous. I know we're running out of time, Neil. I
Yeah,
know you. I know Neil is watching the clock. I know
yeah.
when Neil is.
Yeah.
But this will be my last thought
Yeah,
or
yeah.
comment. I find it disturbing
Mhm.
that, when we look at the executive level of a crown corporation like Community Living BC,
Mhm.
who are all making well into the six figures,
Oh, yeah.
who have vacation, who have benefits, who have a nice pension.
Mhm.
When we look at the minister, the exact same thing.
Mhm.
And then we look at the people that they are supposed to be serving, disabled British Columbians who are living in poverty. Not all of them, but many. And we look at somebody like Florence Girard, who died of starvation in the province of British Columbia in 2018. And then we have this executive team and really all the people who are working for the Crown Corporation who have everything they need.
Mhm.
They aren't worrying about their next paycheck. They aren't worrying about buying groceries. It's absolutely abhorrent. And it has to change.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. On that topic,
Don't go into a topic, Brent, because Neil's watching the clock.
I'm going to bring out the cane, Brent.
yeah, bring out the king. But nicely said on that. But you look at the BC budget, and 2025. They've all in their legislature now. They're all debating on that BC budget 2025. So far, the only and this is not favoring any political party, just for our viewers watching this, but the only person who has actually come up with a topic on their view of the BC budget is one of the new members for the BC Green Party, and has said that they want to see the rates raised within this session. Now, within this session, does that mean the 4-year session or this session and the spring session? And however, I'm very, very cautiously optimistic, but not even really optimistic, because I've heard that line before.
Yeah, we all have.
Yeah, and for me, it's more I call it signaling,
Virtue signaling.
virtual
Yeah.
signaling of saying,
Yeah.
yes, we want to do this, but is the NDP going to allow that to happen?
Mhm.
However, they are voting. They have an agreement with the NDP that they're voting in favor of these bills. Now the member is going to support the bill, but there's a condition in place saying, yes, if you raise the rates up to a no less than poverty level of $2,400. That's what he's saying. Now, they could say, oh, sure, we're going to do that, but then nothing will happen. People's lives, people with disabilities, their lives don't get on hold. Of saying,
No.
okay, like I can tell you, just I'm not going to dive too much in it because Neil's going to get the cane out and say, Brent, stop.
He is.
Yeah. But what I'm going to say is, I got a rent increase in 2024. No rate increase in the budget of 2024. Now we got nothing increase again in 2025. I got a rent increase again. And my corporate manager, they are such lovely people. I mean, some people say, well, no, corporate landlords, I mean, they're terrible. No, like they're very genuine. And they question it all the time is, why didn't the government give you an increase? At least the most minimum tied to inflation. That is a good question. That was last year. This year, I haven't asked the question yet to my manager. I'm scared, actually, because the manager is going to say, well, why? Do they not care about people with disabilities? The answer is no. No, they don't. Because if they did, they would have actually increased the rates. I know a lot of advocacy groups, Tamara, they've been calling for it and they're very disappointed. I mean, and sure, they can be disappointed. Yeah. But how about live the experience? Live in the now and say, well, what do I need to cut back on? More food? Cut back on more food? What do you cut back on? I mean, there's not much more to cut back on.
I know.
So anyway, that's my rant on the BC.
We had a few rants today. That's good.
Yeah, there's always lots of rants.
This is like therapy, isn't it?
It's like we had our good therapy session. I appreciate it.
There you go.
Like always, and it's always a great pleasure having you join us, Tamara. And look forward to our next rant session.
I do too. I really appreciate both of you asking me. So thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure having you on. Like always, we'll look forward to the next rant of where we'll leave off from this point and see what happens in that BC budget going forward. We'll kind of continue on where we left off from today.
You bet.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Like always, like, share, and subscribe. If you really love the content, there's that little like symbol. Neil will explain. I'll just pass the mic over to him, and he'll explain how that works.
Yeah, you can buy us a coffee by in the live chat right now. There's a little dollar bill. You can click that, and after the video goes live, there also will be a dollar bill at the bottom of the video. That's just a buy us a coffee thing, so you can contribute to the channel. Or you can become a member and contribute monthly too. That's it.
Yeah, our viewership has really grown. It's a very popular podcast. So if you love the content, just keep on watching. And I hope you tune into some Breaking with Brent segments. There's a lot of different segments to go through. So maybe do some binge watching and catch up where you left off. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for Tamara for coming on, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara.
Thanks.
Thank you.